This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Boy, do we got a great podcast for everybody. Got to talk about the latest and greatest going on with America's team, the Wolverines, trying not only to take over the Midwest, the Big Ten, but they want the support of the country. Can't wait to talk about the chaos that ensued for the Wolverines. Despite everything that went on, they went out there and really embarrassed Penn State at the highest levels. We'll talk about that. Sharon Moore going off in the postgame in probably one of the top 5 pressers or top 5 interviews after a game that I've heard. I got me laughing, got GIFs created for days, so it was some good shit. And then the second half of the podcast, got to talk about the Lions, who were unbelievable in their efforts out west. Shootout. It was great entertainment. Now, knowing that the Lions won makes it so that we can kind of enjoy our conversation, but there's something we got to talk about, a huge wart that could derail the season. So make sure you stay tuned for the second half of the podcast. Cuz, what's going on, man? Jim Harbaugh, they did him dirty. They said, okay, get on the plane. And the news came down last Friday. And I think most people started to expect that the possibility was there that the Big Ten would do it like that, where they wait until the last possible moment. They wait till the man's on the plane. But in the end, I think kind of now when you see how well prepared Michigan is, how stacked they are, and especially how bad James Franklin coaches, they didn't even need their head coach. That's how this has fallen for the Wolverines. I mean, in the second half, cuz it's unheard of at the highest levels of collegiate athletics in football that you don't pass the ball. It's unheard of, and you still are effective. That's how bad Penn State came, and knowing that they had Jim Harbaugh and Michigan on the ropes, that's the performance you come with. You don't know the difference between 9 points then kicking. You don't know how to understand when to kick an extra point or go for 2. At this level, embarrassing for Penn State that they were not able to take advantage of Michigan. But, cuz, we got to look at it. Jim Harbaugh was not on the sidelines. What was your reaction to the whole chaos that ensued starting Friday afternoon?
Yeah, I want to address that first because I really do feel like in the long run, the Big Ten just looks really, really small here. I feel like Tony Petitti looks almost like he's afraid. I feel like it was a chicken shit move, the way he went about this. This team is on the airplane, and they're flying over to Penn State to get ready for their game, and that's when you're going to level the suspension. I just feel like it's uncalled for. I get what's going on, and I do feel like Michigan deserves to be punished, right? I've been very upfront about that, and we've talked about it. I've talked about hammering Michigan, so it's not like I've got a homer hat on. I just feel like it's a Friday afternoon. This team is traveling to their destination, and you're going to suspend him. I think it was like at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, what are you doing? I mean, it's cool because Michigan had a suspended Jim Harbaugh earlier in the year, so you had a contingency plan and you knew how to operate, which isn't really cool when you say it like that. But I just feel like it was the most chicken shit move. I feel like if you are the Big Ten commissioner, you're a guy who obviously you were bullied into making a decision. That's how I feel at this moment in time, whether it was by the other coaches or whether it was by the ADs. You are a guy who obviously is not very strong, not of strong will, not of strong mind. And to me, you as a commissioner, you just come off looking weak. I feel like that was a weak move to do. All that being said, I think it was kind of great because if the Michigan players didn't have a chip on their shoulder before, and if they weren't fired up before that, well, you just got them riled up. I was expecting this game to be a little bit closer. I was expecting a pit fight here. And really what you got was you got a Michigan team that, for the most part, controlled this game. For the most part, they took this game over. And once they forced that fumble, it was pretty much sealed. And you're right. Michigan just ran the ball down their throat. And I think it was really good coaching by Sherrone Moore. He realized we're not going to be able to stop their pass rush up front. We've been ineffective doing that all day. Look, Penn State's got a really good defense. They've got a really good defense. We talked about it last week. We said that their defense was really, really good. Probably the best in the Big Ten. All right? Their offense is pitiful, though. Their quarterback is trash. And Michigan was able to exploit all of that and use it to their advantage. They're like, look, we're not going to be able to stop your pass rushers. So all we're going to do is we're just going to run block. And we're going to run it down your throat. Stop us. Like, we are going to impose our will. We are going to tell you what we're going to do. Now go ahead and try to stop us. And Penn State couldn't. You knew it was going to be a run. It was like constantly just running. They'd line up in an I formation. You just run the ball right down their throat. Couldn't stop them. Couldn't. And Michigan forced a big turnover when they needed it, got it, and then after that, it was all over. It's weird to watch James Franklin because he is a really, really good coach until he goes up against some decent competition. You realize that Sherrone Moore has more top 10 wins than James Franklin? In that one appearance, Sherrone Moore has outpaced Franklin for top 10 wins in a season. It's nuts how small he gets and how he coaches. It's like everything tightens up for him, and his thinking brain just goes offline. And next thing you know, the guy is just acting reactionary, and it just doesn't work. If you panic at the highest level, it trickles down to everybody else. You need your head coach to not panic. I think that's the one thing that you can say about Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh a lot of times looks frazzled, sometimes looks demented on the sideline. But when he's talking to his players, the guy looks incredibly cool, incredibly calm. And I think in this case, Sherrone Moore was incredibly cool, incredibly calm, and was able to just kind of take this game over just by running the ball. I think it was really, really astute by him. This guy's going to be a future head coach. He's going to be there, whether it's next year or whether it's in a couple of years. He's going to be a head coach somewhere. He might even be the head coach of Michigan. Who the hell knows how all this is going to shake out? But again, I think it was really, really small by Tony Batiti to suspend the head coach of a team that was traveling to their opponent's place just mere hours before their game gets underway. To me, it just blows my mind. Blows my mind. Less than 24 hours out from a football game, you're going to suspend him. It's going to be interesting to kind of see how this plays out, though. Look, I don't necessarily know if Jim Harbaugh is going to be back for Maryland. I don't necessarily think that you need Jim Harbaugh back for Maryland. I do feel like you need Jim Harbaugh there against Ohio State. I think that you need that to kind of happen. I think as good as Sherrone Moore did on Saturday, I think there's just a different level. There's a different swagger that Harbaugh kind of brings to that team and kind of emboldens that team with. I don't know how that plays out against Ohio State. All that being said, I still think they beat Ohio State, and we're like 2 weeks out. I feel like Ohio State is a slightly better version of what Penn State is. Really good on defense. You got a quarterback that struggles, and you've got a running back who's okay, and you've got a really great wide receiver. But again, if the quarterback can't get him the ball, what are we doing? So it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out. I find Jim Harbaugh to be comical, though, because in light of everything that's gone on, him getting suspended, this team winning, everything that goes on, he comes out and he calls this America's team. And this is a guy who I just don't know if he reads social cues very well. Like, if you had to bet, and you are in this line of work, would you put him on the spectrum somewhere? Because I kind of feel like at this moment in time, like, not making fun, I feel like at this time, Jim Harbaugh is a really awkward guy. And I feel like he might be a little bit autistic because he just does not pick up on social cues very well. And he is just a funny guy to watch operate in general. Would you place him on the spectrum?
It's crazy to look at when you see the way in which Michigan has benefited from this whole thing. They've literally taken this as a rallying cry when they, in fact, have evidence that they cheated. They become victims. And Jim Harbaugh then goes out there and says, this is America's team. It's awkward, but it is something that I'll say this. Regardless of how weird he is and what kind of, and you've heard obviously that he rubs people the wrong way in the NFL, that just his attitude is just something different. That's why I don't think he'll ever coach in the NFL. Those kind of athletes want cheerleaders. They don't want Bill Belichick anymore. It's that time is done. You either got to be a former player, which he does have the benefit of being a quarterback, or you got to be really cool with the fellas so that you can take videos after the game and smoke cigars and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't. I don't see Jim Harbaugh doing that. But for him,
he's not necessarily the rah-rah kind of guy like that.
Right. For him to rally everybody and to say that that America should rally around Michigan, I think he's well aware that the country is not happy with the University of Michigan. There's a little bit of trolling in there. There's a little bit of that, hey, I'm speaking to the fan base here, and I'm looking at the Wolverine supporters there that were upset, and he's like, Michigan, we're underdogs, and look, we had to rally through some of the mistakes that we made, some self-induced mistakes. But I'll look at it like this. Jim Harbaugh, coaching during the week, has his team prepared. Sharon Moore, obviously, is a good coach. Your defensive coordinator, super solid. You recognize this with Jim Harbaugh. The most important group that he's got to talk to, his players, his coaches, and the alumni, full support. I mean, you got a handful of people that are off the bandwagon and are talking about integrity, but by and large, you're able to survive a cheating scandal. A cheating scandal where a person that you hired, an individual that is part of the Michigan football program and has been dismissed, was doing some things that were at the highest level scandalous and inappropriate, and they got caught. And I'm curious to see if tomorrow on Friday, if Jim Harbaugh testifies. Like, I'd love to see an attorney that's really smart start to go up there and start asking some questions and starting to probe a little bit, going, so you feel like you bear no responsibility in regards to the individuals that are brought to this program? And it's just kind of see how Jim Harbaugh squirms. No, Michigan's not America's team. You have a large alumni base. You have the biggest support. You got a president that wants to wash Jim Harbaugh's feet. So if you're Jim Harbaugh, you're golden. I mean, if this doesn't bring you down, other than criminality, this is something that in some weird way has made him even a bigger stature. His stature has grown amongst Michigan. I mean, you got Sharon Moore crying, Jim Harbaugh, man.
Crying and cussing, bro.
I love you, motherfucker. You're my dog. I was like, dude, that was crazy. And you got the players
what
this
was
year.
Fox doing? Why was nobody on the censor button? Come on, what is going on?
That was crazy. And I think you got the support of your team this year. And I think this football team is going to rally around what happened to Jim Harbaugh. It's crazy.
This is what I'll say. This football team has the making of something that we really haven't seen before. This football team has that special it, right? And by that, I don't mean that there's necessarily one guy on this team who you're like, oh my God, they're super elite and are going to be excellent at the next level. Because when I watch this team, I don't necessarily see that. I don't see that guy who jumps off the screen at me where I'm like, oh my God, when they get to the NFL, they're going to be awesome. It can take over a game. But this team has the it factor where it is all team. It is no me. It is all TEAM. You know, it is all we. There is no I with these guys. And that is rare. You rarely see that on a team. And this team bleeds that. It bleeds it with every player on that team. And that right there makes this team special. And that right there can help push you forward. Now, look, we both understand that talent wins on the field. But when you're having a bad day and you know you can count on the guy to your right or the guy to your left to pick you up, it makes it okay, and it makes it a little bit easier. And it also takes some of the pressure off, and you generally play better when you have less pressure. So this team, like I said, it has that weird it factor, and it just kind of feels like it has the makings of a team that could be special, that could get the job done. It'll be interesting to see how everything plays out. Again, you got to get through Maryland, you got to get through Ohio State, and you got to get through the Big Ten championship game. And then you've got some stuff to take care of if you get to that next plateau where you've got to battle your way through to get to a national championship game. But this team has a weird quality about it. And I think everything surrounding them regarding this cheating scandal and regarding the tweet bet and everybody rallying behind the rallying cry of bet, It does feel like those hats that they had made up, where it is Michigan versus everybody. That's how this team feels. It feels very insulated, and it feels like it is blocking out a lot of the noise, and it is basically throwing a middle finger up to the NCAA, to everybody in the Big Ten, and to everybody who wants to hate on them. You can either get on and ride with us, or we're going to run you over, is basically what they're telling you. And it is interesting to watch them kind of take on this. It's almost like a Raiders-esque version, almost like a bad boys appeal to this team. If you like, basically, you ain't with us, then we don't want you. And if it ain't right, if it ain't rough, it ain't right. It's that kind of feel and mantra for these guys.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to see. And it was great to see. At least now there's going to be some level of accountability. He's going to have to answer. There's going to be a court hearing. There's going to be, I'm glad they didn't automatically give Michigan the temporary restraining order. I think at first, kind of give them an opportunity to kind of feel what it's like to not have your coach. It is still different. You did feel, obviously, Sharon Moore was under pressure. The game was tight. There were opportunities there that Michigan could have had their season derailed. So that's just a little bit of angst. The ride can't be all that smooth. And it was a good test. I'm not one of those people that will discount the game because you didn't pass the ball or you struggled with pass protection. It was a good win. It showcased, I think, that, Michigan is still among the top 4 teams. And now I can't wait. I need them to defeat Maryland so that they can set up the undefeated showdown potentially with Ohio State. And let's see how it shakes out. But let me ask you this. Do you think outside of how it was told and stuff like that, did Jim Harbaugh, I just think that the suspension in of itself is fine, but it was weird in that he gets to coach during the week, which in the end, Michigan has kind of thrived. They've been able to, he's been suspended earlier this year, so Michigan has gone through it before. I think that if the Big Ten presidents and the individual laying the punishments had any real brass and had any real gumption, I think Jim Harbaugh, the right punishment would be, if you have this, special exemption and you can use it, I would say Jim Harbaugh is suspended for 3 games and he must be away from the program completely. Am I wrong, or do you feel like 3 games where you can still work during the week but not show up on the sideline? Is that some weird compromise, or how do you feel about the suspension that was levied?
I just kind of feel like it was Tony Batiti trying to play with both feet, one in the sand and one in the water. He wasn't really sure what he wanted to do. It really feels like he was getting pressured by everybody else, and then you were getting pushback from Harbaugh and from Santaono and from Ward Manuel, and he really didn't want to upset anybody, but he wanted to try to appease everybody, right? He wanted to be able to look at the other 13 ADs and coaches and be like, look, I suspended him. I suspended him at the toughest part of their schedule. And then he wants to turn around and look at Santaono and Ward Manuel and Jim Harbaugh and be like, look, you guys should be able to get through Penn State. You guys should be able to get through Maryland. We'll see what happens when it comes around for Ohio State. You're going to take me to court. I already know this. So let's just go through these paces and let's just kind of play this whole thing out and kind of see where we get. If you're able to get through Ohio State and you get to the Big Ten championship game, I'm assuming he's going to be reinstated because, again, we talked about it last week, money. So he'll get into the Big Ten championship game, and then he'll get to go and coach his team in the national championship game or in the playoff. So it'll be one of those things where he's trying to play both sides and really trying to, again, it's his first year as Big Ten commissioner. It's a really hot seat to sit in your first year when you've got everybody demanding action and you've got a school that's basically like, hey, screw you, and they're throwing you the middle finger. So he was in a tough spot, and I think he tried to appease everybody. I agree with you. If you are going to show that you're that dude, that you're that guy, and you want to be taken serious, you probably needed to hammer him a little bit harder. You really needed to challenge what they had going on. This, to me, seems like it was a punishment that was somewhere in the middle, and it was like, you guys will accept this, right? And Michigan's like, nah, not really, but it could get worse, I guess. So it just kind of felt like he was trying to play both sides.
Yeah, it was wild to see how that all shook down. The drama, the engagement, everybody, all the media is just like on the story all the way, and it's going to continue with each and every game. But for Michigan, they have found a masterful way to rally around this. They found a way to take chicken shit and then and turn into chicken salad. So it's crazy, and it's real unfortunate that it's a situation in which something like this, where we're not really talking about the cheating in and of itself, and eventually, it's going to come out. It's going to come out exactly how this went down, who went where, and everything like that. So I look at it and I say, Michigan now just needs to soldier on, figure out how to win, figure out how to continue their season, and I think we can start to look at this program in next week, in the coming weeks, in the coming days, and to really evaluate, is this team a team that can go up against Georgia, Alabama, Florida State, Ohio State? Can they compete at the highest levels? It's close. I think the offensive line might be something there with the passing game that you might need to tighten up and clean up moving forward. Do they have enough? Because when you watch Georgia, it just looks different. It's a different style of football. Does the defense have enough to clamp down in big moments? And we'll talk about that as well, move toward football, because look, in the end, the punishment's been served, and this is what it is. And it'll be interesting to see whenever the full results of the investigation come out, what's going to happen with everything going on. So, all right, let's switch gears, because was that one of the best games you've seen in a couple years now? That was a great back and forth contest that I got to thoroughly enjoy from a different perspective this week.
Yeah, I was impressed with a lot of what I saw from this team. I thought this team looked really good on offense. I thought this was a team that showed that it can take a punch and it can punch back. And I think the most impressive thing that I seen in this game was Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell basically showed he's got his coaching chops. It's really weird if you juxtapose where Dan Campbell was 3 years ago compared to where Dan Campbell is today. This was a game where I didn't really question a whole lot, and I didn't really feel shaken by anything he did. And his clock management, his time management, going into the final 2 minutes, this guy still had all of his timeouts, and you knew exactly what he was going to do. He was going to try to get this within range for a comfortable field goal, and he was going to bleed that clock down, and he was going to kick that field goal. I thought that you got to see Dan Campbell basically grow up in front of your eyes, and I thought that was the most impressive thing to come out of this. Now, yeah, the offense looked awesome. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, you've got a dynamic duo there. You've got some thunder, lightning, a little bit of brash and crash and mash and smash. You got a whole lot of good going on there. And again, Monroe St. Brown, I don't know how many times we can say it, but dude is basically the MVP of that offense. Like, he is a top 10 wide receiver in this league. He is a stud. And then you look at the guys who are around him. Sam Laporta is going to be one of the best tight ends in the league. Sam Laporta will be talked about with the likes of a Rob Gronkowski, with the likes of a Travis Kelce, with the likes of a Tony Gonzalez and an Antonio Gates. And I'm talking the greats of the game. Those are just recent guys. That's the type of player that Sam Laporta is going to develop into. And then you sprinkle in a guy like Khalif Raymond who can just make big plays, especially when you need them. It is fun to watch this team. It is a lot of fun to watch this team right now. And coming out of this game, a ton of praise being heaped on them. You can go read the national stuff. There are people comparing this team to the 49ers and to the Eagles and saying, look, the Detroit Lions are on par with them. And right now, if you look at the way the playoffs would break out, the Lions are right between those two teams, right between the Eagles, who are number one, and they're right between the 49ers, who are at number 3. This is a really, really good team. All that being said, I have some questions about this team being as good as the 49ers and the Eagles. I think they are close, but I do not believe that this team is yet on par with those teams. I think this offense can go toe-to-toe with just about anybody. I have questions about this defense. I'm not sure if this defense is ready, and I'm not sure if this team helped itself like they should have at the trade deadline, making a move. I think what you have with both the 49ers and with the Eagles really haven't looked right this whole year, but they're still able to get wins out of games that they just kind of look like they're stumbling a little bit. And the 49ers have had a stretch where they've kind of tripped themselves up a little bit and dropped 3 games in a row. So all these teams have warts. All of them do. None of these teams are perfect. And I do think if the Lions were to play the 49ers and were to play the Eagles, yeah, they could possibly get a win. But I still feel more comfortable if I had to betting on those two teams over betting on the Detroit Lions in a matchup between those three teams. Does that make any sense? I feel like I talked myself in a circle there.
Yeah, no, we see the Lions collectively as a team that has grit, and you understand they're playing for the playoff seed. They know they want to make the playoffs. They want to win the division. They see the light at the end of the tunnel. They see the potential to be the number one seed. So you see the drive. You see the execution. You see, when healthy, that Graham Glasgow at right guard makes this offensive line special. And when healthy, the offense is great. It's world-class. It's Super Bowl caliber. The defense needs to hold on, and that sucks because that's where you got to ask yourself, is the offense good enough to carry the defense? In the postseason, if you don't get a pass rush, then everything is magnified to the nth degree. You're going to face a good defense. You're going to face a defense, even if it's the Vikings, you're going to face a defense that can pressure the quarterback. It's not going to be as easy. So that's why I think people forget. You and I have the benefit. We remember 2014. We remember 2011 when Stafford had 5,000 yards. We remember the 90s a little bit, at least I do, when the team every other year made the postseason. You know, we've seen good Lions football team. Now it's been, several years since they've made the postseason, but there's regular season good and then there's playoff good. And right now, this is a solid regular season team right now. The thing we got to wait and see is how do they step up in the postseason when the pressure's the highest, the attention's the greatest, a lot more distractions, a lot more interview requests, and you're going to face an opponent, generally speaking, that is going to be a little bit more well-rounded than the Chargers, who suck in such a clear way when you go into
Anytime
it.
It's crunch time, that team folds up like a table.
Exactly. I mean, it's not happenstance that if you go to all Lions and we say David Montgomery is going to shred the defense, the reason is the numbers dictate that the Chargers' run defense is abysmal. Abysmal. So make sure you visit because our bet's 7-2. Get your ass paid. I mean, a lot of extra spending money if you have an opportunity to make these wagers and bet responsibly. But I look at it and you say, when you get to the postseason, it's going to be a lot more evenly matched. And I do think that the defense will get better. Maybe the addition of James Houston and C.J. Gardner-Johnson, C.D. Deuce, if he does make his way back, will be a huge lift. But I think that they're going to have to iron out the defensive line. They got to figure out a way. Okay, if we can't get the pass rush, then we got to find a way to blitz a little bit more creatively or timely to say, okay, then it's bend, don't break. It was bend all the way over and take it with no Vaseline this week, and you can't have that. 5-6 straight drives with touchdowns, that's really unheard of in the National Football League. Key fourth downs, and I was concerned because that fourth down play was really a great play call by Kellen Moore and just torched. When you know it's going to 1-3 and you still can't stop it, that's rough. That defense is not playoff caliber right now, but we still got 8 more games. 7-2. You got more time to fix this, but what's your concern level with the pass rush? Because that's the biggest war on the team.
So this is the thing. If you look at teams in the playoffs, right? You look at the really good teams that have won the Super Bowl or teams that were playing for the Super Bowl. They might not necessarily have a top 10 defense or have the best defense, but they have the ability to manufacture and create a pass rush, and they have the ability to force turnovers. Either you're creating a pass rush or you're forcing turnovers, or hopefully you're doing both. And the teams that tend to do both tend to be the teams that hoist the Lombardi Trophy at the end. So you've got to figure out a way to manufacture a pass rush, and you've got to be able to figure out a way to create those turnovers. Like you said, Chargers' final 5 drives. Take this in: 10 plays, 75 yards, TD. 10 plays, 75 yards, TD. 10 plays, 92 yards, TD. 16 plays, 75 yards, TD. 7 plays, 68 yards, TD. You weren't stopping anybody on Sunday. Your pass rush wasn't getting home. And I look online and I see all these Lions fans being like, oh, well, Aiden was held. Look, the good ones get home. It doesn't matter. You got to play through it. You've got cornerbacks out there basically raping guys and giving a whole new set of down. I'm talking to you, Cam Sutton. I'm tired of looking at you. I'm tired of seeing all of your pass interferences. You're hurting this team. Stop it. Stop it. Your job is there to create turnovers. You ain't doing it. You're not doing it at all. Instead, you're giving up free plays because you're creating pass interferences. Stop right now. You have to be able to get home with a pass rush. If James Houston isn't coming off the bench, because it doesn't sound like he's going to be ready until I don't know, maybe the playoffs start. And at that point, I don't really know what good you are for me because I don't know if you're going to be even in game mode or in game condition. So I'm not really sure what's going on with all of that. So like you said, you're going to have to design some exotic blitz packages. You're going to have to figure out a way to help get Aiden to have one-on-one so he can get home. Or you're going to have to kind of change some stuff up. You're going to have to get creative. You're going to have to figure some stuff out. And if you hear Dan Campbell talk, Dan Campbell just basically says, we're going back to basics. I don't know what that means. I'm not sure what that is because I feel like you should have been able to have gotten home on Justin Herbert this week, and you couldn't. You didn't. And your defense basically crumbled. They paid the price. So I don't know if this defense gets better. I think this defense might be the Achilles heel of this team. I think this defense might be the thing that lets them down. They've got to figure something out because, look, Chargers are a good team. Chargers are nowhere near an elite team and nowhere near a team that is capable of dominating you and taking you over in a playoff run like the 49ers or like the Eagles. If you want to get on that caliber of a team, you want to be that caliber of a team, you've got to get this defense fixed, and I think it starts up front. That's why I was pounding the table to go get somebody who can come in and rush, get somebody who can come in and plug the defense and really collapse that pocket and get to the quarterback. And they didn't do any of that because I think they were thinking that James Houston's coming back sooner than later. And I don't know if that's the case. I can't tell you if he is or isn't, but I don't believe he is. So I think somehow you have to fix this pass rush on this team, and you have to somehow get this defensive front a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more angry, and get them home a little bit more. So for me, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is probably a 7.5, 8 as far as a concern goes, because you've got to be able to do it because your offense isn't going to be able to go on the road, play in inclement weather, and be able to match a team that has that type of high caliber offense blow for blow. I just don't see it happening. If you look at what happened in the Baltimore game, that's probably the worst weather that they played in. Yeah, I know it looks sunny on your television, but the winds were really whipping, and it was tough to throw the football. This team can't throw the football. It makes running the ball a little bit harder because then you could just stack the box. And yeah, David Montgomery's really good, and Jahmyr Gibbs is really, really good. I get it, but there's only so much you can do. So you've got to be able to play complementary football and help that offense out. So for me, it is an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10 for fixing that defensive pass rush. Where does it rank for you?
Yeah, no, it's an 8 exactly. It's a big concern because it messes everything up. Cam Sutton, Jerry Jacobs, they can't guard forever. It's just impossible. So Dan Campbell said when we asked him about it, he said that there's some things that popped up on defense that he hadn't seen before. Maybe miscommunication, maybe a little bit of confusion, maybe a little bit of hero football. But by and large, when you look at it, it is concerning that in the biggest games that you don't see like improvement. Like, okay, let's just say, for example, you give up 30 points. Okay, that's fine. Still a little better than the Ravens game, but it was a complete meltdown. And that the biggest concern that I think people are going to have is that it seems like everybody can exploit Eric Glenn's defense if they have the right pieces. One wide receiver, talented quarterback. It's kind of what you get in the postseason. So I got to ask you, because I think this is where a lot of people are looking, the Vikings, are you concerned about the run that they're on? They did it with a quarterback off the streets, and it's starting to feel like this is a team now that they're going to face the Lions twice at the tail end of the season. What's your concern level about the Vikings and the run that they're on? Because they've done some things in an unprecedented fashion with a new individual that was on the Lions practice squad last year. Couldn't even crack, an NFL roster. Has been bouncing around all over the place. But it seems like there's been a natural fit with the Vikings, and Josh Dobbs is doing some things that people are really, really impressed by. What do you think? Are the Vikings for real, or are you seeing a team that – and plus they've done it without Justin Jefferson. 1 or 2 more weeks, he returns. Now you add basically a key piece to your offense. Something special could be happening over there in Minnesota.
I think the story of Josh Dobbs is so interesting and so fascinating. This is a guy who basically bounced around the league a little bit, played on a bunch of people's practice squads, and went to Arizona, helped them win a couple games. They traded him to Minnesota. He basically walked in off the street and has single-handedly won them 2 games. This is a team that was supposed to be collapsing. This was a team that was supposed to be falling apart. You lost your starting quarterback, your high-paid starting quarterback in Kirk Cousins. and this team was supposed to basically crumble like a house of cards, and yet they just inserted Josh Dobbs, and they are just rolling. Everything just keeps going, and everything just kind of keeps falling in their way. It is a bit of a concern. I think it makes those last two games of the season that they're going to play against each other in 3 weeks. It's 2 games in 3 weeks apart, or within 3 weeks. It makes those 2 games very, very interesting because it feels like Minnesota is going to be playing for something. I think we all, once Kirk Cousins died on the field, we all were like, all right, cool. Like, Minnesota isn't going to be playing for anything. Those should be easy. Those should be just W's. Just pencil them in. I don't know if that's the case anymore. All of a sudden, that final stretch, those final 3 weeks of the season get really, really interesting for the Detroit Lions because Minnesota looks like it's going to be a pretty good team that is planning to stick around and is planning to compete for a playoff position, which is something that we had no foresight of back in week 3, week 4, week 5. Like we kind of thought the Lions were just going to kind of roll, and now you have to account for them. You have to consider what Minnesota is doing, and you've got to look at it. So it's going to be very, very interesting. And yeah, what Minnesota is doing is very concerning. If you're a Lions fan, you should be keeping track of what is going on because as it sits right now, I believe Minnesota is in that 7th spot. They're one of those wild card teams, and they'll be coming to your house to play you at this moment in time. But the playoffs are supposed to start today. So I am concerned. I find it interesting because, again, like you said, they've got 2 dynamic wide receivers. They've got it's basically running back by committee, but it always seems like they're able to kind of hit the nail right on the head with the running backs. They just kind of grab a guy, plug him in. Who the hell is Tyler Chandler? I have no idea. Like whoever that guy was that was running around and scoring touchdowns for this team on Sunday, I'm not sure who the hell that guy was. But they have the ability, especially on offense, to do a lot of dynamic things. And defensively, it's a pretty good defense. They make it very, very difficult on you. So I have a lot of concerns with Minnesota. I watched a lot of their game this weekend, and it's one of those things where if you're a Lions fan, you have to take note of what's going on in your division. And yeah, you're getting prepared to take on the Bears this week, but you also have to be concerned with what's going on with Minnesota because they were able to basically just plug a dude in, and they're able to get a ton of production out of him. And this team is rocking and rolling right now with Josh Dobbs.
Yeah, it's crazy. But the good thing is you face the Bears this week, and I have literally no concern about the Lions beating the Bears. Could be a very fun game. I think it's going to be a blowout.
What about Justin Fields coming back?
I mean, still you saw last year with him coming back. Obviously, the game on the road would be concerning, but I think you have the opportunity now to limit everything else. Let him run for 80, 90 yards, but nothing else. They got nothing else, literally, and I just don't see an offense that's really talented. I don't see a lot of good things that they can do. I don't think that they're going to stop the Lions offensively. I think the defense is going to be looking for revenge. I'm not concerned in any way about the Bears this week. Should I be?
I think if Justin Fields plays, you have to be a little bit concerned. The ability to go up against a running quarterback, I think, presents its own unique set of challenges, right? If you got a guy who just kind of sits back there and is a pocket passer, I think the way this defense is constructed, it's a little bit easy for them to kind of corral that guy and handle that and try to collapse that pocket. We just talked about the pass rush, right? So if you've got a running quarterback and that pass rush is able to get home, your guy's still got to wrap up and take down that running quarterback. Instead, if he gets that edge, he's picking up anywhere from 5 to 12 yards at a clip, possibly more if he's really elusive. So I think if Fields plays and they let Fields play the way that he wants to play, I think it becomes a little bit more of a challenge for you. I think their running game and their receiving game, it's nothing special. I don't think it's anything great, nothing to write home about. But I think adding in a dynamic quarterback all of a sudden kind of changes your game plan a little bit. And I think going into this game, you're not really sure who's going to be the quarterback. Is it going to be Fields or is it going to be, Tyler Bajan? Is it going to be him? I don't know. Nobody knows. So now you got to prepare for 2 quarterbacks. And that kind of takes time away from really dialing in and really working on what you've got to take care of. So It will be an interesting game. I think the Lions win. I don't know if it's as lopsided as you're making it sound. I think Lions win. What's the spread right now? Like 9.5. So I'm going to say that they win by 10. So I don't know if that's super lopsided for you or not. It's a double-digit win, so it's what it is. I don't necessarily buy into the way that defense is constructed. You and I tend to agree philosophically when it comes to building your defense. You think you have to win in the trenches and you build up front. We both believe that. And then you can kind of add pieces around. So generally when you do build, you build up front with your defensive line, and then you kind of fill in your secondary, and then your linebackers are kind of like the supporting cast. They're pieces that you can plug in and they can do different things. And you can kind of get guys who can do special fits for you, and you can design different schemes to where you can kind of highlight your linebackers. The way that the Bears are built, it is very linebacker heavy, and it is very cornerback and secondary heavy. Their guys up front aren't necessarily great. Yeah, they just went out and they re-signed Montez Sweat, 4 years, $98 million. And yeah, that was a guy that we both wanted here. But other than that, I don't really know what you got out there. I mean, you've basically traded away a guy like Khalil Mack. You don't necessarily have a dude who can really wreck shop. As good as Montez Sweat is, I don't think he's a dude who can really wreck shop. He's a guy who is better complementing somebody else like an Aiden Hutchinson. So it'll be interesting to see that offense go against that defense. I think this offense will be able to put points on it. But their offense, again, if Fields plays, I think he adds another level to things that they can do and things that our defense has to account for. And that becomes concerning for me. It is the Justin Fields factor that makes me concerned. I know he's not a great passer, but it's his ability to take off and run, and you having to have guys that are willing to bite on that run. It'll help open things up for that pass game, and that's what makes me really concerned.
Offensively for the Lions, how do you think, what was your assessment of seeing Gibbs and Montgomery together? It is the vision that the team likes, but do you think with the offensive line, it was announced on Tuesday afternoon, Big V goes on IR. It is a situation in which Graham Glasgow replaced him admirably. If they can stay healthy, boy, two guys that potentially can take it to the house, that makes the offense lethal moving forward. It was so impressive to see Jahmyr Gibbs take the next step, and now the competition made David Montgomery play even better. It was amazing to see.
Yeah, look, this is what you wanted, right? That was why you went out and you got Jahmyr Gibbs. He was a nice compliment to David Montgomery. This is what you were hoping for when you had Jamal Williams and you had DeAndre Swift. It just didn't work out, right? If the offensive line can stay healthy, if the offensive line can work the way it is currently constructed, and look, I think Graham Glasgow is a better guard than Big V is, anyways. I think that you've got the makeup to be a ground and pound team that can light you up through the air. And there's not a ton of teams out there that have the ability to cut you with a knife three different ways, whether they're going to cut you with Montgomery or they're going to cut you with Swift or they're going to hit you through the air. There's not a lot of teams that pose those multiple threats. And I think this offense, that's the one thing you can say about it. It is multiple. You are getting different looks, and you have guys who can do different things. And look, Montgomery is great, and Gibbs is great, and they both have the ability to break it off and take it to the house. They both do not shy away from contact, which is great. They are a team that can wear on you and lean on you, and then when you get into the fourth quarter and you need a big run, you can hand it off to these guys, and you don't necessarily have to worry about ball security issues. You don't have to worry about these guys wearing down. These guys can keep leaning on you and keep pressing on you. And as long as the front five stay strong and they're able to stay healthy, I think this team can go a very long way. I think this team can go a really long way, and I think they can take over games. So yeah, I loved what I seen this past weekend, right? This is what we wanted to see. This was the whole reason Jahmyr Gibbs was drafted, was to complement David Montgomery. And this is what the vision of this team was. And the cool thing is, you've got to kind of see the growth of Jahmyr Gibbs, right? And you got to see Jahmyr Gibbs kind of baby steps, probably the first 5 games of the season. And then Montgomery goes down. So now he gets a whole bunch heaped on his plate. But they still didn't give it all to him. They just gave him more. And he was able to digest it. He was able to understand it. And then he took that next step in like weeks 6 and 7 and 8. And now you get to this point in the season, and he's basically up to speed. Like, there's more that they're going to give him, but he is up to speed now. And Montgomery is up to speed. Montgomery is healthy now. So it poses a really dangerous threat. I think it is awesome to see these guys getting where they're at right now together, along with that defense or with that offensive line. I think it makes for a really interesting watch when they're on offense. I think it's great. I think that you need to get a little bit more production from some of your wide receivers to kind of help offset that, whether it's J-Mo or whether it's Donovan Peoples-Jones. Maybe work Khalif Raymond into the mix a little bit more. He's always electrifying when he gets the ball. The guy has the ability to scamper and scurry for 25 more yards. He's able to take basically a screen pass and turn it into a chunk play, which is always fun to see. So I think you got to work some of those wide receivers in a little bit more to really open up that big play potential downfield, and that helps those running backs. But yeah, man, the running game is awesome to watch right now.
To the point that I think everybody was shocked to hear Tony Romo, who was obviously a former teammate of Dan Campbell's early on in his career. Do you think the Lions, he said it, formidable Super Bowl contender right now? Do you think at this point in time, where they've built it, could you see it? Are you starting to envision it? With that defense, I know we talked about the defense kind of maybe being the factor that prevents it, but are we maybe too critical? Are we not hopeful enough that this team could make a run this year?
So it would all have to fall just right for you, because I do not believe in your defense. I don't think your defense has gotten any better since really the beginning of the season. And I don't think this defense is getting to the quarterback as much as it did last year. I think there is a stat where like 82 or 83% of this team's sacks have come in 3 games, and that's just not going to get it done in the playoffs. So I feel like the real Achilles heel of this team is the defense, and if they are going to play in a Super Bowl, if they are going to be that team that's going to be able to do that, it's all going to have to fall right for them. It's all going to have to kind of work out in their favor. And I don't know if that happens. I don't know if you're able to go on a stretch where you're able to win that many games that just kind of work your way, where your defensive front is better or slightly or marginally better than what you're playing against, or your secondary is able to create and force more turnovers. I just don't know if that's going to happen. I do not believe at this moment in time this is a Super Bowl caliber team. Again, like we talked last week, I think this is a team that can win one game in the playoffs, and they'll get to the second. They'll get to the NFC Championship game, and I at that point it's a coin flip for me. It'll really depend on kind of how things go and who they're playing. I do still believe that this team is in dire need of getting that first round bye and getting that first seed where everything's got to go through Ford Field. I think that is incredibly important for this team right now. And again, it's just because I do not trust this defense, and I have question marks about this offense playing outside of a dome and playing in different weather. In adverse weather, I don't know how this team will perform. The one game where they had their most adverse weather conditions, and it was just wind, it really hampered this offense, so much so that you got annihilated by Baltimore. So I do not believe at this moment in time, just because they had a really good performance on the road against the Chargers in a dome, I do not believe at this time that this team is a Super Bowl caliber team. I think you can talk about it, and I think you have all the right to have hope for it. But I think if you really want to get serious about it and you want to have a really strong look at it, and you're maybe even thinking about putting money on it, I don't think it's a good investment. I don't think it's a smart buy right now. They've got to show me a little bit more on the defensive end.
I agree 100% wholeheartedly. I think that when we look at this football team, it's on a trajectory to have potential long-term success, but the funny thing is now when you have success, you're hearing wild ass rumors that Texas A&M should make a push for Dan Campbell, which they should. But Dan Campbell will never leave because he's about to get paid. With one playoff win, he'll probably get another 2-3 years added onto his deal. He's only in year 3 of his contract. Maybe he doesn't get more years. Maybe he just gets a bunch more cash in the coffers. But cuz think about it. Jimbo Fisher got $75 million to walk away. You're a rich donor. You're at Texas A&M. You got oil money. Who's to say? You say, Dan, you talk to his reps. You say, hey, 100, whatever you want, 130 million. I don't think he's the best candidate. I think somebody should get big money, but I just think that you're going to hear opportunities for Ben Johnson. You're going to hear opportunities for Aaron Glenn. You're going to hear these things. So the window, as we talk about it, it's open, but the thing that makes it a little bit nerve-wracking is the window can shut just that quickly. So I'm curious to see how fast the Lions respond to success and how they handle it, because you're starting to see now some reports of contract, what a contract could look like for Jared Goff, the decisions that got to be made on Jonah Jackson. So I'm curious to see how this window plays out, but it's going to be a fun ride over the next 8 weeks. And I think the Detroit Lions are in a prime position, and it's just been fun, man. Have you taken it all in before we get out of here? Has this been as fun as it was in 2014? For me, it's a lot more fun because of just being there, and the attitude is so much greater. Everyone's a lot more happy. Being somebody that now talks to the players, you get a little more insight into everything. I feel that everything has been a lot more relaxed, a lot more fun, jovial, kidding around. And I think that when you see guys dressed in costume, the swagger, you see all the post-game stuff, it's just been fun to kind of be part of a winning team. 7-2, only written about 2 bad losses, and legitimate concerns where we can talk about Dan Campbell's aggressiveness, key plays, schemes. We're talking about stuff that it feels like we're back in the NFL club for the first time in about 8 years.
Yeah, for me, this is more fun. It's because it feels real. It feels like this is a real team. I always kind of felt like that team in 2014, and I think it was it 2014 team was the team that lost to the Saints, right?
No, 11 was the Saints, team? 14 was the Cowboys flag shit.
Okay. All right, so Cowboys. All right, so it just kind of always felt like those two teams that made it to the playoffs and lost, it always kind of felt like they were a little bit fraudulent. Didn't feel like they were necessarily built for long-term success. This team feels like it is built for long-term success. That 2014 team, you kind of knew because Ndamukong Suh's contract was coming up, and he made it very apparent that he didn't want to be here. At that point, you had passed on Aaron Donald, and you could have really helped insulate this team through that draft, and you didn't. So it always kind of felt like that team was kind of built on popsicle sticks, and they could break at any time. This team, however, feels like legit. It feels like if the defense is able to get home, you're winning that game no matter what. It feels like the offense will give you enough offense to win that game, and it feels like this team. Look, I'm starting to believe that the reason this team passed at the trade deadline was because they feel like they're ahead of schedule. This team feels like we are building something and we're doing it this way because they're basically playing chess. They're 5 moves ahead right now, and they feel like they are in a really good spot. That they are ahead of schedule, and because of that, they're willing to roll with this team and see how far it can get them, and then they're willing to make the tweaks that are needed from there. The only problem with that is you can look at just about any other team. That window, it is open, and then it quickly closes. Look at the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills are a team that everybody said that they were winning the Super Bowl this year. They were supposed to have won the Super Bowl last year, and they're supposed to win the Super Bowl the year before that. And right now it looks like the wheels are falling off. So it'll be interesting to see. I think this is a more fun season just because it feels like this is real. This feels like this is a legit team that is built for long-term success.
Yeah, it does. It has a feel where one more draft class, one more free agency period will give this football team another opportunity for long-term success. I can't wait to see it. It's been fun to be a part of, and it's been cool to talk football at this level, to look at other teams too. It makes it fun to watch teams like the Ravens, teams like the Steelers, other teams too, like watching the Broncos on Monday Night Football because the Lions are going to play them. They're a team, I would say, that the Lions probably this year, you could probably even weather 2 more losses the rest of the way and end up being 13-4 and still have a real good chance to be the number 1 or number 2 seed. So I think that they'll be tested. I think that Broncos game is real interesting. The Saints game will be interesting. The 2 games against the Vikings. So there'll be more tests, I think, headed down the stretch. And I think the way the schedule laid out makes it perfect for the team going into the postseason. There'll be some gritty games. There'll be some up and down moments. There'll be some lessons that they can learn. And hopefully, really the key, cuz, it's health. This offensive line stays healthy. I think that the starters are really hungry, and I think they're all friends. And I think this 5 has the potential to do some damage. And they found the right guy in Graham Glasgow because Big V, unfortunately, just can't stay healthy. So let's see. Final stretch of games here. I think 5-3, 6-2 is real strong here in the final 8 games of the season. It was a wild ride, and it was a great opportunity to sit back and watch the Lions win a last-second game in Detroit. It was great to see the Lions win a last-second game at SoFi Stadium in a key game where every decision counts, and it was a great situation to see for the Detroit Lions, who now sit at 7-2. Your football team. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSGROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. Lots of great content ahead, breaking down the Wolverines, the Detroit Lions, so much good stuff, college football, big-time news, everything covered here on Doc and Jock. Cuz, great stuff. I can't wait to fire up the microphones, turn on the lights in the studio for next week on the latest and greatest episode of Doc and Jock.